On July 19, 2017, after 24 years of publication, the Sonic the Hedgehog series by Archie Comics had been cancelled. There have been a number of factors that led to this, including lawsuits, financial difficulties, and more than likely, Archie wanting to focus more on their own IPs rather than licensed content. Regardless, summer of 2017, Archie Sonic was done. But Sonic Comics themselves were not. For you see, on July 21st, 2017, 2 days after the cancellation of Archie Sonic, it was announced that another comic company, IDW Publishing, had acquired the Sonic license. At the time, it made sense because the company was known for publishing works based on some well-known properties like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Star Trek. Admittedly, they've lost some licenses over the years, but I'm getting off topic a bit. The IDW Sonic comic began on April 4th, 2018, with the first 4 issues published weekly throughout April, until switching to a monthly release format in May. And so here we are, 5 years later. The IDW Sonic comics are still around, with about 60 issues, 4 miniseries, and a number of one-off specials. That is, as of this writing. So today we're going to celebrate the occasion, taking a look back at the past 5 years of IDW Sonic, discussing its setting and the characters, both game and comic originals, and reminiscing on some of the adventures they've gone through. I will also take the time to list off my top 5 story arcs thus far, finally capping off with a review of a new story done by the team who worked on issue 1. I'm going to tell you ahead of time to lower your expectations regarding this new story. Before we get started, I'm going to place a spoiler warning here for all issues of IDW Sonic that have ever been released, as well as any previews to future issues. When the comic was announced, the question was, who would be the creative team dedicated to bringing this new series to life? Luckily for those who have been fans of the Archie Sonic comics in its twilight days, the ones that would kick off what essentially its replacement series consisted of the same individuals that worked on the Archie books. Writer Ian Flynn, writer-artist Evan Stanley, artist Tracy Yardley, artist Adam Bryce Thomas, artist Jennifer Hernandez, and colorist Matt Herms. I'm fine with carrying over creators from a previous project to a new one, especially those that have proved themselves in the past. For one, they're freelancers, and second, at least to me, it helped with the transition, and that hopefully the series would at least be entertaining. At the same time, I'm not against the idea of adding new blood to the book, whether it be in the writing or the art. The caveat being that their ideas must gel well with what was established. That actually happened within the comic's 3rd year. At the end of the comic's longest major story arc to this day, the Melvirus Saga, Ian Flynn stepped down as the main writer, and Evan Stanley took over. She had some experience with writing official Sonic comics in the past, and wrote stories in the IDW Sonic specials. Plus, she's as big as a Sonic fan as Ian, and it's not like Ian's leaving the book entirely. He's worked on other story arcs in the main book, or at least started arcs before Evan took over, as well as working on specials and miniseries. So he never left the comics. He just took a step back and let Evan assume the main writer role. This situation is not like the Archie Sonic comic days pre-Ian, when different writers working on the book would have clashing ideas. I mean, I assume both Ian and Evan communicate with one another, along with the book's editor. To make sure there's some consistency, Sega themselves will be more hands-on with the comic compared to the Archie Sonic series. On the one hand, I understand this decision. Sega does not want things to get as messy as it did with Archie, especially when certain writers are involved. On the other hand, this means that the IDW series has had mandates placed on it that may limit its potential. And fans can see that with regards to certain characters. The thing with mandates is, given enough time and possibly fan demand, they can change and make the series better. Back to the subject of new creators, one of my long-standing theories is that the yearly annuals, which explore the IDW Sonic world and its characters, are a testbed for new talent. One writer I like to point out in particular is Daniel Barnes, who wrote a story in the 2022 annual. Not long after, he was brought on to work on a 4-issue miniseries event called Scrapnik Island. Personally, I think it's because the higher-ups saw something special with Daniel and asked him to write the story. Maybe he was the one that pitched it in the first place. I could be wrong either way, though I have read somewhere that one of Daniel's main inspirations was Ian Flynn. So what kind of Sonic world did the creative team, create? Even though the series began with the same people who worked on the Archie book, it is not a continuation of that continuity. Instead, it's one that's similar to the game continuity. It might even be in the same continuity with the games. Let me explain. Sega started this unified canon initiative to smooth out game events and unite different media under one continuity. They even have a lore group to keep track of things. Ian Flynn and Evan Stanley are a part of this group if you're wondering. The point is, many of the events of the games have already happened in the comics. In fact, the series begins months after the events of Sonic Forces, with the world still recovering from that war. Also, game events have often been brought up by the characters, in addition to visiting some familiar locations. Besides the obvious like Angel Island, there's a visit to the Resistance base from Sonic Forces, and Tails' Emerald Town lab from Sonic Battle. Emerald Town itself being a subdivision of Central City, another game location. However, the city's populated only by anthropomorphic animals, no human characters in sight. At the time of the comic's launch, Sega was still operating on the idea of having two worlds, Sonic's animal world and the human world. Since then, the idea has been reversed. The humans and the animal people live on one world, the former on the big continents, and the latter on the smaller islands. Personally, I'm glad since the two worlds thing was a bit messy. This does present a problem if they attempt to make the IDW series canon to the games. Namely, where did the humans go? If they are to appear in the series one day, the powers that be have their work cut out for them. How do you explain where they've been all this time? Maybe they're saving their grand return for a milestone issue or something. This being a comic series, of course we would visit locations beyond those of the games. There are original towns like Vista View, Riverside, and more importantly, Spiral Hill, which is the home of a couple of characters that will be prominent throughout this book. Speaking of characters, let's focus on the ones that appear throughout the series. First, we have the game cast. Fans have their own ideas on how they're supposed to act based on their game appearances. Depending on the character, some people enjoy their personalities, or wish those personalities can change. From what I've read, I think the writers were trying to go for an overall general approach when it comes to how the characters act in the series. Let's quickly go through some of them. First, there's the title character himself. Sonic is a free spirit that helps his friends and stops tyranny wherever he goes, and is a determinator. I believe many of us can agree to that. There is one main trait that is debatable among fans, and that's Sonic showing mercy to his defeated enemies and offering them a chance to live better lives. This trait was shown in the games, most notably Sonic and the Black Knight, but is more prominent here. I think the reason people have a problem with Sonic trying to redeem defeated villains is because if said villains are game characters, we know it's not going to last, and once the defeated villain is back in action, things tend to go bad for the heroes. Sonic and his friends do point this out. One in particular, Espio, gave Sonic the death glare because he lost his teammates due to Eggman's I'm Back plot. I'm going to cut Sonic some slack because when he left an Eggman with amnesia in a peaceful village early in the series, he didn't count on an Eggman fanboy tracking him down. Even if Eggman was placed in a more secure facility, said fanboy would free him using his magical warping gem. I won't go easy on Sonic when he let a defeated Metal Sonic go, which was the catalyst for restoring Eggman's memory, or at the very least, speed up the process. I don't think he knows that detail as of this writing. Plus, it might have been possible Metal Sonic could have repaired himself. Nevertheless, Sonic sticks by his beliefs, and he is eventually rewarded later in the series. We'll get to that later. As stated earlier, Eggman had lost his memory at the beginning of the series as a result of Phantom Ruby shenanigans. He was taken to a nearby location, Windmill Village, and once confirmed to have no memory of his previous life, he remained there as the kindly inventor, Mr. Tinker. Unfortunately, he's the franchise's main villain, so he eventually returned to the role by the end of year 1. However, some things from Eggman's time as Tinker popped up here and there throughout the series. For example, when he confronted Sonic for the first time since he got his memory back, he did reminisce about his time as Mr. Tinker, and the peaceful life he had. Then again, when Eggman started his new world domination scheme, his first target was Windmill Village. While his tenure as Mr. Tinker didn't last, he built something, or someone, that would carry on his legacy. We'll come back to that. Tails, as always, is Sonic's loyal sidekick, brother figure, and a kid genius. Because the series begins not long after the then recent main game Sonic Forces, there's still the stigma of cowardly Tails. His appearance and actions in issue 1 were the powers that be's way of telling the readers, you're not getting that Tails. Sure, he'll get a little emotional, he's still a kid after all, but he'll collect himself enough to get the task done. There was one moment he reverted to cowardly Tails. This time it was justified as he was facing an end-of-the-world situation. No, seriously, it was all or nothing at that point. Knuckles at the beginning was still the leader of the Resistance, a move that almost cost him everything. Eggman's forces used the opportunity to invade Angel Island and capture the Master Emerald. If it weren't for Sonic and his friends, Knuckles would have lost his home. After saving the island, he decided to end the Resistance and resume his rightful duty as Guardian of the Master Emerald. Although this does come with the side effect of him not appearing in the book as much. This brings us to Amy Rose, who's considered the real leader of the Resistance. She tried to keep things going, even at one point trying and failing to rope Sonic back in. But when Knuckles ended the Resistance, Amy reorganized it into the Restoration, which is dedicated to rebuilding the world. It soon became clear that Amy would rather be back on the field helping people, rather than leading an organization, as one of the downsides is doing a ton of paperwork. After a major world-ending disaster was averted, she got her wish. A character named Jewel the Beetle offered her services. After Amy aided in the transition, Jewel officially took over, allowing the pink hedgehog to be the empathetic, on-the-field, hammer-wielding hero she is. By now, you're starting to see a pattern with these characters. It appears the goal was to get them back to some sort of familiar status quo, and by the end of year 1, it was mostly done. Amy eventually got there during year 3. The other game characters are what you'd expect. The Chaotix, as always, are after the big payday, Rouge is obsessed with treasure and jewels, and so on and so forth. The game characters do go through some interesting scenarios in the comics. For example, Blaze takes a vacation on Sonic's world after destroying the last robot pirate on hers. Silver, with Blaze's help, grows a garden, which reappears every now and then in the books. And E123 Omega is reduced to a head for a time, with one story arc having the group finding the necessary materials to rebuild him. The one game character that didn't translate well into the comics was Shadow the Hedgehog. Sure, the character has pride, but not to this extreme. It got to the point that he became too prideful to listen to any sound advice. Word is that, at the time, Sega wanted him to act this way. As a consequence, Ian and Evan decided to limit his appearance in the series for a time. Thankfully, things are getting better for Shadow as Sega has loosened the reins a bit on the character, and he appears alongside Team Dark for the first story of Year 6, Urban Warfare. We'll see where things go from there. The IDW Sonic world is populated with more than just the game characters. We gotta have some comic originals, and not just some background characters. Sadly for Archie comic fans, those original comic characters, at least the ones from the reboot era, did not transfer over. A new book means new characters, ones that would better fit with the aesthetic of the overall Sonic franchise. So let's get to the more prominent ones. On the hero side of things, the first one that appeared in the book is Tangle the Lemur. Well, the first one that was meant to be a character. We'll get to that later. Debuting in issue 4, Tangle was first advertised with this picture of her in silhouette with Sonic. In hindsight, it was probably not a good idea since the silhouette kind of resembled Reboot's Sally from Archie, and it might have given some people the wrong idea that she would appear in the book. Going back to Tangle, she has a childlike demeanor, is easily excitable about things the game characters take for granted, and most importantly, uses her prehensile tail for a multitude of tasks. A whip, rope, slingshot, an extra hand, and so on. She got into the action when Badniks attacked her home of Spiral Hill Village. Yes, she's one of the characters from there, and she helped out Sonic and Blaze defend it. Since then, she's become more involved in world affairs, having tasted the thrill of adventure and wanting more. She's also childhood friends with the previously mentioned Jewel the Beetle, making her character number 2 from Spiral Hill. In fact, it was thanks to Tangle that Jewel helped Amy out of her predicament with the restoration. There's more about Tangle I want to talk about, but let's first move on to the next new heroic comic character, Whisper the Wolf. Introduced in issue 8, Whisper in the beginning tends to fight from the shadows, being as Silver puts it, a guardian angel. She does this by utilizing her variable Wispin, allowing her to use 5 Wisp powers one at a time. Besides them, she worked alone until meeting Sonic and Silver in an Eggman facility. Originally, she was part of an anti-Eggman mercenary team called the Diamond Cutters, until one of their own betrayed them, and they were wiped out. Whisper survived because she was somewhere else. Ever since meeting up with Sonic, Whisper started forming bonds again, particularly with one Tangle the Lemur. Eventually they would form a new team with a third member and would name it after Whisper's old one. Now when I say Tangle and Whisper bonded, I mean they really bonded. To the point where when Tangle sacrificed herself to save the others at one point, Whisper lost it. And normally she's quiet and reserved. Likewise, when Tangle got better, Whisper's joy was off the charts. From a meta perspective, Tangle and Whisper's popularity exploded, to the point that the two got their own miniseries, official merchandise, appeared in mobile games, and in the case of Tangle, a shout out in an actual Sonic game.
I bet Tangle would love climbing around these ruins.
Moving on to the rest of the comic original good characters, let's briefly touch upon Jewel the Beetle again because her role in the series has gradually increased since her introduction. As I said, she was Tangle's childhood friend, who tried to keep the lemur out of trouble. She was also very organized, and knew how to run things, thanks to her owning a mineral museum. This led to her taking over leadership duties in the restoration, and with Amy's help, she restored the organization to an even better state prior to the Zombot attack. While she is not an action girl, Jewel is good at pointing the right people in the right direction. Another non-action heroic character that came onto the scene was Belle the Tinkerer, a wooden puppet-based robot. Based on her name and the outfit she wears, she was made by Mr. Tinker as a helper/daughter figure. Things were good for a time until Tinker was kidnapped and changed back into Eggman. Belle left her home to try and find Eggman because she believed by talking to him, things would work out for the both of them. During her travels, she would meet up with Sonic and Company, though Sonic almost destroyed her on sight. I mean, hey, she was in an Eggman facility after all. When she finally met Eggman, she realized to her horror that her father was gone. And after receiving a goodbye note from Tinker just before he changed back, she said her final goodbyes before moving on to her new life, being part of the restoration. Belle is a bit of a klutz, not helped by her pull tail and auto kick feature Tinker built into her for some reason. Still, she is helpful when it comes to repairing broken things, like when she helped Tails fix E123 Omega, and repairing Whisper's Wispin when it broke. There is one more character on the hero's side that I would like to highlight, and originally, this one wasn't even supposed to be a character. The comic has had a number of friendly background characters, some even got fleshed out a bit such as Radio DJ Night the Owl, and his custodian partner Dawn the Rooster. But the one I want to focus on is Lanolin the Sheep. She first appeared in issue 2 as a random villager who asked Sonic and Amy for help against the Badniks. She may have meant to be a one-off, but her design intrigued a number of readers. Starting with issue 13, her creator, artist Adam Bryce Thomas, would sneak her in as a background Easter egg. Kind of a Where's Waldo situation. Eventually, her role started expanding to the point that she became a very important member of the restoration. Which brings us to, at the time of this writing, the current story arc of the series, Urban Warfare. Lanolin had put together a rapid response team to combat growing threats that may threaten the world. The members included herself, Tangle, and Whisper. Yes, this is the new Diamond Cutters I mentioned earlier. Lanolin was inspired to do more thanks to Sonic's actions back in issue 2, but soon found that she's out of her league when it comes to field work. Even Tangle had more experience at this point. She revealed that the real reason for doing this is to not feel vulnerable like she was in issue 2 again. With the help of her new teammates, Lanolin pulled herself together and would go on to help Sonic's crew thwart Eggman's latest scheme. This brings us to the comic exclusive villains. I mean, we can't have the heroes face off against the likes of Eggman, Metal Sonic, and the Deadly Six all the time, though admittedly, I do like how the comic has handled the Deadly Six. They got more personality than they did in Sonic Lost World. Anyway, let's start with the minor comic villains. The first ones to appear in the book are the Skunk Brothers Rough and Tumble. The main gimmick for this duo is getting their hands on some powerful weapons, often teaming up with bigger villains to do so. Don't let their quirky Team Rocket-esque introductions fool you. Even without weapons, they can be a nuisance to the heroes. Another nuisance comes in the form of Clutch the Possum. Introduced during the Chow Races and Batnik Bases arc, Clutch was a retired arms dealer that specialized in selling salvage goods like old Eggman tech. But with the emergence of a new generation of heroes, i.e. the Gamecast, he decided to get back into the game. For the moment, he's employed rough and tumble. We'll see how long that lasts. And in an upcoming story arc, as of this writing, he seems to be helping another minor villain based on this cover. That villain being Mimic the Octopus. Yeah, I know he doesn't look like an octopus here, but that's because Mimic, if you couldn't tell by his name, is a shapeshifter, able to take the form of anyone, or on the rare occasion, anything, like say, a Batnik. Thing is, his imitations aren't perfect. For one, they're off-colored compared to the original. Second, he doesn't have the memories or skills of the original. And finally, he's got suckers on the palms of any form he takes. If you go back to this cover of a future issue, I have a feeling he's trying to fix this flaw. It's because he wants to infiltrate Restoration HQ to target Whisper. He is in fact a member of the original Diamond Cutters that betrayed the others to Eggman and got most of them killed. To say he and Whisper have bad blood is an understatement. Now, I wouldn't consider Mimic a minor villain per se based on the potential damage he could cause, but compared to the likes of Eggman and Zavik of the Deadly Six, he's small fry. And now it's time to talk about the major comic original villains. Starting of course with the Eggman fanboy himself, Dr. Starline. When first introduced into the series in issue 11, he made it his goal to restore Eggman to normal. I mean, we needed a way to restore the franchise's main villain, and once that's done, Starline got himself aboard Eggman's Metal Virus scheme by presenting him the Chaos Emeralds. Soon, Starline learned why it's not okay to meet your heroes. He got on Eggman's bad side when he almost killed Sonic, something that's reserved for a mustache villain. When witnessing an actual fight between Sonic and Eggman, he expressed disappointment that it lacked the pageantry he's heard about. And finally, he's horrified by Eggman's apparent lack of preparation. When the Metal Virus situation got out of control, he took matters into his own hands and recruited the Deadly Six to fix the problem, believing he could control them with a cacophonic conch. However, Starline did not prepare for the massive amount of air required, and him being too close to the Deadly Six. This resulted in the Deadly Six taking over, and Eggman having to team up with the heroes again to save the world. Something Starline was against. As Starline was about to warp away, Eggman stole the warping gem, which proved to be vital in saving the world, and fired Starline by tossing him into the portal. Starline did not take it well. From that moment on, he planned on breaking the endless conflict between Sonic and Eggman, aka the Sonic Cycle. To do this, he hijacked one of Eggman's industrial bases, got a replacement for his warping gem called a Tricore, and created his own Sonic and Tails knockoffs. Though instead of building machines like Eggman, he kidnapped a couple of innocents and altered them via genetic manipulation, cybernetics, and massive brainwashing. There were a few snags to his plans due to people hacking into his personal logs and retaliating after what they found out. But ultimately, he succeeded in taking over the Eggman Empire. For a brief moment. Starline soon learned the hard way that Eggman was more prepared than he thought. After becoming aware of Starline's activities, Eggman took the necessary precautions to not only strike back against him, but to deprive him of his precious Tricore. With all that planning ultimately for naught, Starline broke down. Unaware of the falling rubble due to its fight with Eggman, he dies. No, seriously, as of right now, he's dead. Whether or not it stays that way is yet to be determined. Personally, I think it's a fitting end. Besides, his legacy lives on through his creations, Surge the Teneric and Kitsunami the Fennec. As previously mentioned, they were made to be Sonic and Tails knockoffs. They may have powers similar to that of the genuine articles, however, Starline added some extra perks. For Surge, it was lightning, and Kit, water tentacles. Also, their personalities are exaggerated versions of the heroes. Surge has Sonic's cockiness and attitude minus the compassion, and Kid has intelligence and the need to support Surge, minus the ability to act independently like Tails. And all this was placed into their head by Starline. Remember, these were once ordinary people with their own lives before Starline got a hold of them. When they found this out and learned that their past had been erased, They snapped. They planned on dealing with Starline and the entire world because if they have no past, no one deserves a future. They don't get the chance to take out Starline because Eggman did it for them. So all that remains was destroying the world, starting with Sonic. Surge's attitude changed when she learned the truth. Everything she knew was a lie, and it revealed her more vulnerable side. However, she was still influenced by Starline's brainwashing, including dealing with Sonic. She believed dealing with the Hedgehog would set her free, and she almost succeeded in killing him thanks to power-enhancing technology she stole from Eggman. But it broke at the last minute, knocking out the Tenrec. Then there's Kit, whom after discovering the truth, developed a colder side that would often pop up. Similar to Surge, he was still under the influence of Starline's brainwashing, namely, loyalty to Surge. After Surge was knocked out from her failed attempt to kill Sonic, Kit rescued her, and the two disappeared to parts unknown. It's only a matter of time before they re-emerge. For the past 5 years, all these characters went through a number of adventures throughout the book. This included trying to deal with the aftermath of Sonic Forces, ultimately leading into a pseudo-sequel to Sonic Heroes, a robot zombie apocalypse that pushed our characters to the limits, having to dive into some shady business in order to get the parts needed to repair Omega, explore one of Eggman's bizarre towers, dealing with the Deadly Six on Sonic's world, handling a forest fire and a city in chaos thanks to Starline, Surge, and Kit, and later the heroes and Eggman would face off against their imposters. And finally, they're trying to stop Eggman's new city from spreading all over the planet like a parasite. And that's just in the main book. There's also, as of now, 4 spin-off miniseries. The first is the previously mentioned Tangle and Whisper miniseries that dealt with the latter's past. The Bad Guys miniseries, where Dr. Starline recruited a number of villains to further his own plans. Imposter Syndrome, in which Starline field-tested Surge and Kit before making his big move against Eggman. And lastly, there's Scrapnik Island, a story featuring Sonic and Tails crash landing on an island filled with old Eggman tech, populated by mishmashed badniks. Luckily for the two, the natives were friendly. Most of them. Another series of spin-off material set in the main continuity are the previously mentioned annuals. And then there was a free comic book day special featuring Sonic, Tails, and Knuckle taking to Marble Garden Zone to stop Eggman's drilling operations. This feels like a lot, but wait, there's more. Since IDW currently has the licenses for Sonic comics, that means they can print almost any tie-in related material. This includes the only game adaptation they've printed so far, Team Sonic Racing, and an interquel book set in the movie Sonic universe, showing how the characters got to where they are at the beginning of the second movie. Phew! And finally, there have been specials celebrating Sonic's anniversaries. Set in the classic era, one of them has a main story that's basically the classic era's take on Sonic Heroes, and the second one, being more Tails focused, is a sequel to both Sonic 3D Blast and the obscure Game Gear game, Tails' Sky Patrol. Okay, that's everything to date. I bet some of you are wondering, which of these stories do I like so far? Well, it's time for me to reveal my top 5 story arcs as of right now. To make this easier on myself, I'm going to limit it to just arcs as a whole and not individual stories. In other words, main book stuff and miniseries only. Remember, these are my opinions, and you are free to agree or disagree with my choices. Alright then, number 5, Test Run, issues 37 through 40. We're starting with an odd one here. This story has Sonic, Tails, and Amy exploring Eggman's experimental tower due to it causing some dangerous weather patterns. Once inside, they get sucked into a portal that takes them through a bizarre reality filled with gravity manipulation and mismatched badniks. And once Eggman's discovered their presence, he's going to really have some fun with them. What I like about this arc is its atmosphere. From Team Sonic exploring an ever-shifting maze to a seemingly deserted town. There is an unsettling feeling to all of this. Once Eggman gets involved, it turns into a bit of a nostalgia fest as he sicks 4 variants of the Sonic Adventure mech, the Egg Viper, on them. Had it not been for Tangle's timely arrival, Team Sonic would have been done for. This brings me to the other reason I put the story on the list. At the beginning of the story, it shows Belle the Tinkerer causing disaster after disaster, which pays off at the end when she inadvertently caused the destruction of Eggman's tower by convincing Tangle to come along. It was the lemur's tail that caused a feedback loop in the portal system and caused the whole place to implode. I don't know if it was Evan Stanley's intention, but I'd like to believe it. Finally, there's the bit where Belle confronts the true face of her father. It makes you want to give her a hug. Number 4. The Imposter Syndrome miniseries. Not only was this the payoff to plot elements that were scattered throughout past issues and miniseries, it really shows the despicable lengths Starline would go through to observe/impress Senpai Eggman by forever altering 2 possibly innocent civilians into his tools of destruction. Emphasis on tools. Despite all the things Surge and Kit do in the miniseries, and will do in the future, in the end, they're victims unable to break free of Starline's influence no matter how much they try. The reason the miniseries isn't higher is because it's part of the Road to Issue 50 initiative that was going on at the time. So we're only getting things from the villain's point of view. And meta-wise, the looks of these 3 were influenced by some infamous glitch characters from the 2D games. Number 3. The Tangle and Whisper miniseries. I won't go into too much detail on this one since I've already talked about the characters and some of the plot throughout this video, but I'm still amazed this was made a year or so ago after the series came out. As previously stated, the popularity of these 2 comic exclusive characters was way up the charts, and having a miniseries that explored one of their backstories was a brilliant move. The story showed how well Tangle and Whisper can work together despite their conflicting personalities, and introduced a threat that's still relevant today. Number 2. The Metal Virus Saga. Issues 13 through 32, if you include the 3-issue epilogue, and the 2020 annual. Once again, being the longest story arc to date, you'd think it'd be exhausting after a while. And it was probably true for a number of people. Not helped that these issues were delayed in 2020 due to the pandemic. Boy, that was some odd timing. Despite the massive length, the saga made the list because it took the characters and the setting down some darker paths and pushed the characters to their limits. The fact the story was originally meant for Archie Sonic made the darker tone understandable in hindsight. What I also liked about the Metal Virus Saga is that it's pretty much a Sonic game in comic form. Utilizing familiar elements from previous Sonic games really emphasized this aspect. Sonic is inflicted with a physical ailment that either helps or hinders him, something he points out himself. He goes to different areas and fights enemies to achieve an objective. Villains from a previous Sonic game appear and once again hijack the plot, forcing Eggman to once again team up with the heroes. Like Sonic 06's endgame, Sonic is incapacitated, so his friends have to split off to gather the Chaos Emeralds to help him. And then there's the Super Sonic finale. Even though everything eventually worked out, the Metal Virus Saga raised the stakes, forced our characters out of their normal elements, and let's face it, who doesn't love a good zombie story with a twist? Originally, the Metal Virus Saga was on the top of my list, but it has been replaced by a recent arc. This takes us to number 1, the Scrapnik Island miniseries. This self-contained story was a surprise when it was first announced, and upon reading the entire thing, I had a big grin on my face. This was a love letter to past Sonic adventures, most notably Sonic 3 and Knuckles, hence the aforementioned big grin. Scrapnik Island is also filled with a horror atmosphere. Even when our characters feel safe, there's always something lurking that may cause trouble later. Surprisingly, this story ends on a happy and hopeful note, with Sonic successfully redeeming a past villain and having it stick this time. I do hope we revisit Scrapnik Island because I love the design of the Scrapniks themselves, and I hope they go on to live happily, free from Eggman's influence. And that's my top 5 favorite story arcs. I'm sure as new stories are printed, the list might change down the line. Speaking of new stories, as I mentioned in the beginning, a new story was made to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of IDW Sonic. I also mentioned to lower your expectations. The story, titled Familiar Territory, is only 4 pages long. It can be found in the pages of the 5-year anniversary edition of Issue 1. A quick reminder, the plot of Issue 1 had Sonic and Tails help defend a town against the Badnik attack. Familiar Territory starts with Sonic passing by the same town, now identified as Vista View, and seeing it once again under attack by Badniks. Before he can liberate the town again, he's ambushed by a couple of shellcracker Badniks. Anyone else getting Metropolis Zone PTSD? Just before the shellcrackers can finish the job, they are destroyed by a local with a Wispin hammer. This is actually the same individual Sonic saved the first time around. we learn a little bit more about this guy, that during the first Badnik attack, he picked up the Wispen Hammer out of desperation, which is why he was afraid to swing it last time. After Sonic saved him and gave him some words of encouragement, the villager, let's call him Hammer Guy, actually improved himself. He even stepped up to defend Vista View against the Zombots. Not that it did him any good in the long run. He was cured just in time to witness Sonic and Silver hurling all traces of Metal Virus towards the sun. This inspired Hammer Guy to improve himself even more. As he questions Sonic about turning gold and flying, a Buzz Bomber reminds them, "Oh right, there's a Badnik attack going on." Sonic lets Hammer Guy take the lead, and the two head off to save Vista View, ending this short story. Similar to Lanolin the Sheep, Hammer Guy was inspired by Sonic's actions to become better, though instead of joining the Restoration, he's content with defending his hometown. Or maybe he is a member of the Restoration and is watching the town on their behalf. The latter is more likely possible because, with the revelation that it's actually Vista View, that means it's actually one of the locations taken over by the Zeti, Zomom in this case, during the Metal Virus saga, and was imprisoned there for a time. During that period, we see the townsfolk talking about the Restoration, and one poor defender blabs about the organization to Zavik when he attacked the town. Good thing we didn't see Hammer Guy there when it happened. Come to think about it, when does Familiar Territory take place? It's definitely sometime after issue 32, since it is post-Metal Virus saga. Going back to Hammer Guy defending the town, whether he's a member of the Restoration or not, the extra help is appreciated because even though things aren't as bad as the Sonic Forces War or the Metal Virus outbreak, there will still be the occasional Badnik attacks. The story also shows that not everyone is familiar with Super Sonic, but Sonic is willing to share the details if asked. I mean, the fact that Sonic remembers and respects Hammer Guy is a testament to his character. In the end, Familiar Territory is a nice way to celebrate 5 years of IDW Sonic. It may not be groundbreaking, but revisiting the first location and dealing with the same problem again, only this time with some unexpected help, shows in a small way how far this series has come. What does the future hold for IDW Sonic? At this moment in time, there are the remaining issues revolving around taking care of Eggman City, and then a plot focusing on Mimic. Other than that, no new announcements of specials or miniseries. That doesn't mean nothing won't come along later in 2023. Am I worried for the series' future? For the moment, no. Though with word about the state of the industry going around, there is that lingering feeling that something may happen without warning. IDW Sonic will end someday, there's no doubt about it. Until then, I will enjoy the ride as long as possible. Once that ride ends, I hope to look back at IDW Sonic as fondly as I do with Archie Sonic. That includes the good and not so good. So thank you all for joining me in celebrating 5 years of IDW Sonic, and here's to the future.